All right, well, it's 10 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Because you're all here, and that's... Oh, that's loud. That's really loud, huh? Would you prefer it with or without?
Let me turn the volume down.
Maybe we'll turn the volume down. Maybe we'll find a happy medium. All right, well, then I'm just going to shout at you for a minute, really loudly here, until she comes on board with it. So good morning, my name is Nathan Harvey. I'm going to lead this tutorial today all about Chef. Thank you for coming. As I mentioned, this is going to be streamed live to YouTube, but don't worry, nobody can see you, and they probably won't even be able to hear you. Who knows if they'll even be able to hear me? Can you still hear me? All right, good. That sounds good to me. Sound good for everyone? I'm getting some thumbs up, which is awesome. That means we're good. So I have a lot of material that I want to share with you today. We have basically the room from 10 until 5, I think, and then they'll probably kick us out. Is that right, Nancy, till 5 or till 4?
I have the room for 4 days, so if you guys want to go
All right, don't say that out loud, because I will go. I will not stop talking about Chef unless you make me. So, yeah. Who did the prerequisites? You all get gold stars. We're probably not going to use any of the stuff that I asked you to do as a prerequisite, and for that I apologize, but I'll tell you why soon enough. But first I want to introduce myself and learn a little bit about each one of you. So as I mentioned, my name is Nathan Harvey. My dad misspelled my name. The rule in my house was mom picks the names and dad misspells them. And so it's N-A-T-H-E-N. And you can follow me on Twitter if you like. It's Nathan Harvey all together. Just misspell Nathan like my dad did. Also, how many of you are on call right now? Yeah, a couple of you. That's what happens when you teach classes about Chef. Oftentimes, students are on call. I'm a community director, so I'm never on call well, I mean, the community might need me, so I do sleep with the phone under my pillow. But I like that feeling of being on call. So when I teach classes or when I give presentations, I leave my phone on with the ringer on. And so if you tweet at me while I'm teaching, like my phone will go off. So if you want to troll the teacher, just do that, and we'll all hear it going off. What does it mean to be a community director? I'm not really sure, but I've been doing it for about 2 years with Chef, which has been fun. See, there is the phone. One of the things that I do is I teach people how to use Chef. Another thing I do is I wear red suspenders from time to time, and if you know what those red suspenders are about, you're probably a little bit inside, and if you don't, well, you're not in on the joke, and you'll just have to wait till you find out what that means. I'm a co-host of the Food Fight Show. Who listens to the Food Fight Show? All right, we got a couple of listeners. That's awesome. So the Food Fight Show is the podcast where DevOps chefs do battle. If you don't hear enough from me today, go subscribe to that podcast, because then I'll tell you all things about Chef. We have great guests on. You should totally join that group, and you should join us for our... This is my 5th year at Surge. How many people have been at Surge 5 years? And before ever? So there are a lot of people that are first-time Surge. You guys are lucky, and ladies, you're lucky also if it's your first time, because Surge is an awesome conference. It is one of my favorite conferences. One of the things that you might suspect a community director does is go to a lot of conferences. That's true. I do go to a lot of conferences. Surge is definitely one of my favorites. It's super awesome. And Surge lets me give free chef training to as many people as I can fit into a room, which also makes me super happy. And frankly, the training, if you were to buy this training from us, you would probably pay more than you paid to come to Surge. So it's an awesome deal for all of you. And you get to spend the day with me, which is also pretty fun. I have some lab assistants today because we have a bunch of people in the room and I can't help all of you. I'm just going to call them out, and if you can just say, hey, there's Mark Harrison. He's going to help out. Peter Burkholder up front here. There's Peter. And then Karloff is not here yet, so if you need help from Karloff, you're kind of screwed. I'm sorry about that. Maybe he'll be here later and can help you out. And then also, you are my lab assistants. So look around at the neighbor next to you. If you're not sitting next to anyone, I feel really bad for you, or good for you, because you don't have to help anyone, but nobody can help you, except for maybe Mark, or Peter, or myself. And this is really going to be a lot of hands-on, and so help each other out if you run into problems, if you run into issues. Just some quick math and science, because science is when you ask people to raise their hands if they identify with things. That's what science is, right? So if you're a system administrator, would you raise your hand just so I can see who are the sysadmins in class? Cool. And if you're a developer, and you can answer yes to more than one if you like. And how many of you are DevOps? Okay. And business people? And any of you managers? Okay, cool. So I don't mean to like point out the managers and be like, these guys are managers, like they're going to get lost. That's not going to be what happens. We're not going to let anyone get lost. Those of you that said you're a DevOps, I disagree, but it's cool. Like you can keep it. It's fine. I'm not going to fight that fight anymore. And those of you that didn't raise your hand when I asked if you were a business person, you lied. We're all business people because we all should care about business. Who has experience with configuration management of any sort, whether it's Puppet or Chef or Ansible or Salt or CF Engine? Cool. And experience with Chef? All right. Now, for that subset of you that raised your hand when you said you had experience with Chef, when I lie, please keep your mouth shut. I don't want anyone else to know that I'm telling lies about Chef when I teach this class, because I'm the one up on stage, so clearly I'm the one that knows all the things about Chef. So make with the quiet. I will also tell you one other thing about myself that I didn't tell you before. I might curse. It happens sometimes. It's not because I dislike you. Frankly, it's because I have a small vocabulary, and so I need to use curse words sometimes because they're easy and they come naturally to me. If it offends you, I am truly sorry, but I probably won't stop because I can't. But yeah, that's that. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Don't you love the meetings about the meetings? That's how we'll start off this morning, with the meeting about the meeting. We'll talk about our course objectives and style. So also, I want to give you, no, I'll tell you in a minute. After completing this course, you're going to be able to do a couple of things. You'll be able to automate some common infrastructure tasks with Chef. You'll be able to listen to me read slides to you as we go throughout the, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put slides up. I'm not going to necessarily read all of the things. We're going to do a bunch of stuff. The thing that I'm most interested in, though, is the parts where you have hands-on and are doing labs. Is that the part that interests you more than listening to the me? Yeah, probably so. Maybe, you don't know, because I'm kind of, you haven't heard enough from me to make a judgment yet. That's cool. I want to talk about learning Chef, though. The thing about learning Chef is that Chef is awesome, but it's not magic. And all of your knowledge of what it means to manage systems, Chef, by its nature, is going to help you model and automate your infrastructure. Well, if you don't know how to install a package on an operating system, Chef isn't just going to make that. You have to bring all of that knowledge with you. If let's say we're going to manage a web server, maybe we're going to manage some Apache. If you don't know how Apache works, how can you automate the workings of Apache? It's going to be very difficult to do. So when you learn Chef, you bring with you all the knowledge that you already have, and you learn how the Chef framework works and allows you to model that. And that's what we're going to do over the next couple of hours. We're going to work together. I'm going to show you how you can bring Chef to solve problems that you have within your infrastructure. Chef really is a language, and learning it is just like learning any other language. You'll reach 80% fluency relatively quickly, although I won't presume that by the end of today you'll be at that 80% mark. We'll get you like maybe 50% there, but we only have a day. The rest is just going to take practice. And the best way to learn Chef, of course, is to use Chef. So you should do that. This training, I'd like it to be a discussion. I know it's early, but it's cool. There's coffee. I want questions as you have them. I want to make sure that you get out of this day everything that you hoped for and more. We are going to do lots of typing. I am going to give you the slides. In fact, I'm going to give them to you very soon. And if you're if you try just a little bit, you'll be able to get to them right now because they're up on GitHub and you can go and look at them. They're in my GitHub repository or in my GitHub organization. You can find them. You can grab them. But in the slides, we have all of the words that you're going to type when you do the labs. But here's the thing. I do not want you to copy and paste those words from the slides into your text editor. Because how many of you know how to copy and paste already? Most of you, there are a couple of dudes that are like, I got the cut and paste, but not the copy and paste now. So, but that's not what you're here to learn today, cut and paste. I do want you to ask questions, help each other out, and we're going to have some bugs as we go. And when we have those bugs, we're going to troubleshoot them and we're going to fix them, probably together, so that we can all learn from them. This is just an introduction. We're going to do a broad survey of lots of pieces of Chef. We're going to touch on a bunch. We're not going to any of them. But I will answer any question that you have about Chef, which is almost true. If you have a question about Chef and it takes us like way too far down the rat hole, I will say, yes, I will answer that. But come to the bar with me afterwards and we'll have a beer and I'll answer that question for you. So that's what we'll do. You want to know something exciting? This is the first time this class has ever been given. You are getting an early preview of this course, which is awesome because no one else has learned this material this way. But it's also kind of scary because no one else has learned this material this way. So, like, hopefully it'll all work. But we'll find out. And when it doesn't work, we're just going to fix it on the fly, and it's going to be magic, and it's going to be beautiful. You can follow along with the class on GitHub if you go to that URL at the bottom there, github.com/NathanHarvey/Surge Introduction to Chef with some underscores and stuff. You will find there's a PowerPoint there in that repo, and there's a PDF there in that repo. And you can clone that repo, and as I do things, I'm going to commit to that repo as we go. And so you can see all of the work that I'm doing, and you can do all of the work yourself. But since I'm giving you the slides, and that social contract means you will not work ahead, or if you do work ahead and get hosed, like that's kind of your fault. You should stick with the class. Don't work ahead and get yourself lost. And also, not with the copy-paste. Make with the typey-typey, because that's how you're going to learn. So that's better. I mentioned I'm going to stream this live. I am streaming this live to YouTube. Hopefully someone can hear it. If you follow me on Twitter, blank, and play the video, it might be really bad feedback in the room, so don't do that. Because you're all here live, you don't need to watch the live stream. Awesome. All right. What questions can I answer for you so far? There's nothing difficult that you've told us yet. All we're doing is listening to you. It's kind of boring. Cool, let's talk about the agenda. We're going to talk about a bunch of things today. Here's the truth of the matter. I've already admitted that this is the first has been offered. I don't know how much of the day this material is going to take. I have to fill a week worth of chef training for you. We're going to start with what I came to show you, and then if we have time at the end of the day, hopefully we'll get through it all, but if not, it's cool. We'll stop when we're done. But if we get through it all and we still have time, we'll do other stuff, and it'll be awesome. But some of the things we're going to do include, the thing that I really want to get to is testing your automation code. How many of you have used Test Kitchen before? All right. So 2 or 3 people in the room. How many of you have never heard of Test Kitchen? What the fuck is Test Kitchen? See, there it happened. See? All right, so we're going to answer that question. The what the fuck is Test Kitchen question will be answered today. And that's really going to be awesome. We will take breaks. Here's the thing. I love to talk about Chef, and I love to talk about Chef more and then talk about it some more. And what I usually forget to do is take breaks. But here's the thing about you. You're all adults, and so when you need a break, get up and take a break. It's cool. Or if like everyone is falling asleep and I see that, I'll try to stop talking and let you have a break. We will break for lunch, but lunch is not providing breakfast. I think there might be coffee all day. There might be an afternoon snack. But for lunch, you're home, so we'll take a little bit of time. There are plenty of restaurants nearby, and we can do that. So I mentioned that there were some prerequisites, and I also mentioned that you don't have to do the prerequisites, although if you have, that's great because you'll use this stuff later. If you haven't done the prerequisites, ask that you not try to download and install ChefDK right now because tear up all of the bandwidth on the Surge network, and then no one will be happy. You can get all the slides and code, blah, blah, blah. Oh, if you have questions or topics that you'd like to see covered, there's a little questions file in that GitHub repo. You can submit a pull request to that, and periodically I'll check on that repo and see if there are any pull requests. I'd rather you use the hole in your face to open up your mouth and say the question than submit a pull request. I know we're all kind of techies and introverted, and like code is how we talk to one another. But together, so make with the talkie, that would be better for me. One of the prerequisites I had you do was watch a little video that gave you an intro to Chef. Who did that? Liars. No, you didn't. Oh, no. That's the wrong way to say that. So some of you did. That's cool. I'm going to do like a quick breeze through of some things on Chef just to make sure that everybody is sort of level set what Chef is, how Chef works. This is the only section, except for the parts up to now, where there aren't hands-on labs. So if you just bear with me for like 20 minutes, I'll breeze through this. I'll answer whatever questions you have as we go through it, so please shout those out. But then we're going to get into like hands-on with the typing. So Chef is an automation framework. There are awesome benefits of automation. With automation, you can achieve speed, scale, and consistency. Across scale, there are actually a number of different dimensions of scale that might come into play. Scale might be the number of people that you have on your team. It might be the complexity of your applications or your infrastructure. It might be the sheer size, the number of servers that you have to manage. An automation platform can help you with all of these dimensions of scale and can help you reach those automation goals. So a good automation platform will have certain characteristics. It will create a dependable view of your entire network state. It will be fault tolerant. It will be secure. It will provide a nice foundation for innovation. And of course, it can manage things like cloud resources, physical hardware, virtual machines in your data center, whatever. Chef can do all of this. Chef, at its very core, is infrastructure as code. Now, when we say infrastructure as code, we have some very specific meanings, or when I say those words, I have some specific things that come to mind. First, that you can programmatically provision and configure the components within your infrastructure. Now, the components within your infrastructure might be, again, physical machines, they might be cloud instances, they might be virtual machines, and it can go beyond just the infrastructure-y, sysadmin-y stuff. It can be deploying applications and managing all of that for you as well. With infrastructure as code, it's code. Code is the key word there. And we're going to treat it like any other code base. And this is where I'm going to pause and ask you questions, because I get to ask you questions throughout the day also. What do you think it means to treat something like base? What are some things that you do with code bases, with your code? What do you do with it?
Version control.
You put it in version control, right. And you can use any version control system that you want, of course, as long as it starts with GIT. That's totally fine. Any other code repository will work just as well. Or we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, so we put it in a source code repository. That's cool. What else? What else do we do with it?
Peer review.
You peer review it. Yeah. You know what? We're not going to actually. This whole day is going to be a peer review of these slides that I just wrote. So we're going to do that, and then there's going to be labs, and you're going to help me peer review those labs. So that's going to be fun. What else do you do with code? Your application code, your infrastructure code. You test it. Yeah, I mentioned Test Kitchen. Spoiler alert, Test Kitchen is going to be a thing that allows us to test our automation code. You're probably used to testing you know, with some pretty formal mechanisms, your application code, because of course all of your application developers write proper unit tests and functional tests and integration tests, and you put them through a build cycle before they ever get to production, right? Because that's how we all do everything. Yeah. So you test it. What else? There's one other thing that I'm thinking of, but you may have others. So give me one more thing, anybody. All right. I'm gonna give you the other thing that I'm really looking for. So the reason you test, part of the reason you test your code is because another thing that you do with your code bases is you refactor your code bases. You change the way that your applications work. You change the code that you wrote. How many of you wrote code 2 years ago? Of any sort, any flavor, I don't care what it is. And how many of you, if you looked at that code you wrote 2 years ago, would be like, man, that is some good-ass code. I was a good developer. Nobody's raising their hand. The fuck? Oh, this dude is. He's like, yeah, I was super smart back then, and I'm still smart. I'm a baller. I got this. So code is a continual experiment. You're always changing your code, and this is part of the reason why we need things like a version control system. Part of the reason why we need things like automated testing. And the fact of the matter is, when you treat your infrastructure as code, your infrastructure is going to change over time also. Your infrastructure requirements are going to change. The code that you write to automate that infrastructure and to model that infrastructure is going to change. So when you sit down with Chef, if what you want to do is write the perfect Chef recipe that you will never have to touch again, you're going to fail. Because it doesn't exist. Your requirements are always going to be changing. All right, another thing about infrastructure as code. With treating your infrastructure as code, you can reconstruct your entire business with nothing more than your code repository, a data backup, and compute resources. So I will tell you that I became a sysadmin 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I don't know, a while ago, and I became a sysadmin not by choice. So the little quick story time with Nathan. I was hired at this startup to be the director of customer support, and here's the thing about that startup. It was a stealth startup. So a stealth startup doesn't have any products that it's selling to any customers, and I was hired as the director of customer support. How fucking awesome is that? Like, I showed up at work every day and there were no customers calling. It was sweet. It was a sweet gig. The problem was 3 days after I started, the CEO came into my office and said, hey, those developers that built a prototype that got us funding that allowed us to hire a director of customer support. I'm like, yeah, I know those guys. They sit right over there. He's like, no, not anymore. We hate them. We fired them. They're gone. You're now the most technical dude on staff. I said, oh, cool. You know, I'm the director of customer support, right? It's like, yeah. Don't worry, you don't have to build the application. We've hired in a third party to finish building the application for us. All we need you to do is understand that we're going live in 8 weeks, and you need to build us a production infrastructure. Go. Oh, but before you do that, kick them off of the email servers, because I don't want them taking all of the source code with them. I said, well, I am a director of customer support, but I'm pretty sure all our source code is in Subversion, so I don't think it matters if they have email access or not. And he said, stop talking about being subversive, go build us a production infrastructure. I said, fine. So I did that. So I became a sysadmin overnight, but like those of you that raised your hand that said your code was still good from 2 years ago, I was the best motherfucking sysadmin there was 8 years ago. Do you know why I was the best? Because when I would SSH into a machine, before I would hit the magic key that makes things happen, you know, that's the enter key, I would copy the command I was about to hit the magic key for, and I would paste it into a wiki. And that way I could do it again, and it was completely repeatable. And that was fucking baller, man. I knew that when I did that, I could rebuild anything from scratch, no problem whatsoever. But I was also pretty stupid, because what I didn't realize is the minute I hit save on that wiki page, that became the obituary of what my infrastructure used to look like, because that shit was never kept up to date. So it was terrible. But 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I found Chef, and I was saved, and now all is right with the world, and so I'm going to tell you all about Chef today. But there was a point, the point of this story, sometimes there's a point to my story. The point of this story is that after I found Chef, one day I woke up, and I realized this crazy thing occurred to me. The next change to my production infrastructure was going to start with a commit to my source code repository. And that just changed the entire way that I approached everything that I did with managing my infrastructure. I learned that my infrastructure can be disposable. I can throw it away, shoot it in the head, I can whatever. I can treat it like cattle, not like pets. I don't have to care about this bespoke server that I lovingly built with care that has a special name that is meaningful to me, and nobody please touch this thing because it's so pristine and perfect, which of course was just a euphemism for terrible and faulty and will fall over at any minute, and no one will know how to get it back. So infrastructure as code, it's an awesome thing, and with it, with treating your infrastructure like code, you can rebuild everything with that source code repository, your data, and compute resources. This also, of course, has tremendous implications on things like disaster recovery. What happens if that data center goes away and I have everything already captured elsewhere, hopefully elsewhere, not in that data center. Maybe I can rebuild it somewhere else pretty quickly. So when we start managing our infrastructure as code, it is a fundamental shift in the way you manage your infrastructure if you haven't been managing your infrastructure this way before. Of course, everything I've said there about infrastructure as code has nothing to do with Chef. Of course, Chef is a great framework. Is the great framework for managing your infrastructure as code. Chef is policy-based. That means that we're going to capture the policy for your infrastructure in code, and Chef will ensure that each node in your infrastructure complies with that policy. So what you're going to do with Chef is you're going to define, this is the desired state of my infrastructure. I want it to look like this. I want it to behave like this. And Chef will make sure that that is the case. Chef provides you a domain-specific language, a DSL, that allows you to specify your policy in your infrastructure. It says, basically, this is what I want my infrastructure to look like, and it can be either statically defined or it can be dynamically defined. And really what I mean by that is that Chef, the framework itself, is sort of self-aware of your infrastructure. So let's say, for example, you're deploying a web application, and you have a pool of web servers, and in front of that pool of web servers, you want to set up a load balancer. And that load balancer's job is to take a request and pass it off to one of the web servers in your pool. In the past, in my past, I would need to know the names of all of those web servers in order to properly configure that load balancer. I would have to say, oh, well, I'm going to point the load balancer at machine A, B, C, and D. With Chef, we don't need to know in advance the names of those machines or how many of those machines there are or where they exist. We can use Chef's dynamic nature to sort out, what does my infrastructure look like? What's the topology of my infrastructure? Oh, I have 8 web servers. I'm going to direct traffic back to those 8 web servers. And then 3 hours later, scaling up, I have 20 web servers. Now I'm going to pass load back to those 20 web servers. And Chef can handle all of that in a dynamic fashion for us. All right, that's the quick intro, high-level, 30,000-foot view of Chef and infrastructure as code. What questions can I answer for you? Yes?
We have something going from like specifying state A, and during the policy, it changed to state B. Is it always that the client then just go back and go, oh, change it back to state A, okay, and on the next policy, change to state B, and it's just go through.
Okay, so the question was, I have a policy that says A should be true, but then later in my policy it says, no, no, A should be false.
Set it to B.
Or set it to B, right? What's going to happen? Well, so here's the thing about Chef. Chef is stupid. Like, it does exactly what you tell it to do. So if your policy says that this thing should be A, and then it says that this thing should be B, at the end of executing that policy, that thing's going to be B. And then when it starts again, it's going to say, oh, this thing should be A. It's going to change it to A, and then it's going to execute a little further and say, oh, this thing should be B, and then it's going to change it to B. And that's going to be bad, maybe. Maybe that's exactly what you want. Probably not, right? But the nice thing is that we have testing frameworks and testing tools where we can see that stuff before we put it into production. So hopefully you can catch that before it gets to production, and if not, you'll sort it out when shit starts breaking. Does that answer your question? We'll, like, we don't have a lab that explicitly demonstrates that, but we do have a lab environment, so you can break whatever you want. Cool. What other questions can I answer for you? All right. That's it. No more questions. No, it's cool. Ask questions anytime you want. All right. With Chef, we have, oh, the other thing about infrastructure as code, it allows you to abstract away details and like build things up. And so we're going to talk about a bunch of the abstractions throughout the day. The first abstraction that we're going to talk about are resources. And resources within Chef are the fundamental building blocks that we use. So a resource, oh, and the other thing that's kind of hard about learning Chef or any of these infrastructure frameworks is just learning the vocabulary. So when we say resource, we have a very specific meaning, a thing that we're talking about within Chef. So a resource is a piece of the system and its desired state. So it might be a package that you want to have installed, a service that should be running, a file that should be generated, or something along those lines. And you can find documentation about all of the resources there on docs.getchef.com, and we'll look at some of that soon enough. All right, so we're going to do our first lab. And most of our labs, maybe all of our labs, are going to be set up kind of like this. We're going to lay out a problem and then some success criteria. And your job is to get from where we are now, we're in a problem state, and you need to get to the success state. So what we're going to do, I'm going to give you a workstation. And by workstation, typically I mean the computer that's sitting in front of you. This is where you're going to do all of your development work. But since we have such a large class and we don't want to spend the morning troubleshooting everybody's local setup, what I've done instead is give you a workstation off on the cloud. And I'm going to tell you how to log into that thing. But you're going to do that, and then we're going to do all of our labs up on that workstation. That way everything's installed for you and you're ready to go. Before you can get to that, though, I have to answer the question of where is your workstation and how do you get to it? Does everybody have a playing card? If you don't have a playing card, see Nancy outside and she'll help you with a playing card. So this is this might be the hardest lab that we do. Now, that's probably a lie, but this is going to be a little bit dicey. This is the one that has me the most nervous. What I want you to get to is go to that URL. It's bit.ly/1 lowercase msre capital N capital Z, or depending on where you're from, capital N capital Z. Each choice. And from there, you will see, well, why don't I show you what you will see, because that will be easier. What you will see, and if you're watching the YouTube stream, you better not do this because someone here will hate you. You will see a list of workstations, and it's in a chart. And the chart has, or this table has 4 columns to it. The first is the back. So if you look at the back of your playing card, it is either blue or red. So if you were red, and then you look at the suit and the number on your playing card. If you are the red 2 of diamonds, you're like, dude, all of diamonds are red. Remember, that's the back of the card. Then your IP address is that one that's shown there on that page. So find your card in the list, find your IP address. Once you've done so, you should SSH into that machine. So that was one of the prerequisites that you actually needed to do. You have to have an SSH client. And your login and password are here. Chef is the login, and then the password is just this random collection of characters. This is also the point in time where I am going to stop and walk around and help make sure that everyone, all I need you to do is log into your machine. And actually, that's a lie. I want you to do one other thing after you've logged into the machine. I want you to touch a file that has your name. Does everyone, can I, I'm just going to demonstrate. Sometimes I'm going to demonstrate things that you're like, dude, you said touch a file. I know exactly what that means. Guess what? Someone in this room might not. So I'm just going to do that also. So, yeah, Peter's got cards. Thank you, Peter. Whoa. Oh, I did that. I'm going to grab my IP address. It should not be your IP address. Okay, so you should log in. And once you've logged in, I want you to do this. I want you to do touch and then your name. So I'm just going to do touch Nathan, and then I'm just going to leave my keyboard alone for a minute. Let me put the password back up. So after you've logged in, touch and then your name. And it will become very clear why we're doing this in just a minute. Hopefully it will never become clear why we're doing this. Who can I help? Who needs assistance? I will also say that most of our labs build on top of the previous lab. So if you might get lost in the next lab. This one being the most important. You have to be able to SSH into your lab machine. If you can't do that, you're just going to watch for the rest of the day. But that's cool. Like, you can watch. You can work with a neighbor. If you're not comfortable with the typey, you can buddy up with someone that you're here with, and you can pair program. Because that's another thing we do with code. Sometimes we pair program. All right. Has everyone had a chance to touch the file with their name? Who's still needing to do that? Okay. We're going to wait a couple more minutes. What's up, dude? We're waiting for you. All right. You have a slow network? Are you on the Surge network? No. So the Surge network was down earlier. Maybe you should be on it now. It's working. Just saying. So did I mention that we're going to have fun today also? Because that's something that we should do. And by have fun, I mean I'm going to have fun, and I hope that you do too. But yeah, I'm going to make sure I do. So it's kind of up to you to make sure you do as well. All right, we're not going to wait any longer. But if you get stuck, you got people that can help you. So Mark can help you, Peter can help you, your neighbor can help you. All right, so now that you've logged in, what I want you to do is type in ls and then hit enter. And you will not see the same thing that I see. You should see your name and no one else's. If you see two names, you need to say something. And you need to find the person with the other name and say, dude, you're on my machine. What's that? And I would tell you, like, oh, there's another good one that you can select, but I have no idea what card you passed out. How many people are sharing a machine? Just two? Anyone else? Three? So there must be four. It's impossible for three of you to share a machine unless it's someone online that's doing the thing that I told them not to do. Oh yeah, Peter has different cards. He can just give you a new card. Yes, you will not have the Surge introduction to Chef. Only I have that. I'm special. Yes, if that wasn't clear, all right. But you should have your name. You got your name. No one else's name. Great. All right, we're going to wait like 2 more minutes, make sure that everybody can SSH in, sees their name and only their name when they do this thing.
Or just raise your hand if you need help.
Yeah.
What was the password?
The password was just this really janky string here. There's a long story behind why the password is that, and if you ask me later, I'll tell you.
Write it down.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea either to write it down or to log in and change the password to something that you'll remember. And if you don't know how to do that, it's cool. You should write it down. All right. So here we are. We logged into our machine. Of course, it asks you to verify the authenticity of your host when you did so, and we all know how to do that, right? Yes, you type in the letters YES, and then you hit the magic key. That's how you verify the authenticity. Was that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So welcome to your workstation. I want to tell you a little bit about what's on your workstation. You can validate these things by running these commands. First, I've installed ChefDK on that workstation. And you can verify that that's there by running chef space -- version. And it should show you that version 0.2.2 of the ChefDK is installed. The ChefDK is the Chef Development Kit. The Chef Development Kit we're going to use throughout the day. I will tell you a couple of things about it. The first thing that I would like to point out about the ChefDK is the version number. You will see that the version is 0.2.2. This tells you that it's probably a newer package that we have started publishing, and in fact, that's true. So ChefDK is not done. It's not at a 1.0, but it's going to be pretty awesome for us throughout the day. We will discover throughout the day what is included within the Chef Development Kit, if you don't already know. I've also clearly created a chef user. You just SSH'd into the machine as that chef user. And that user has sudo access and has passwordless sudo access. And you can verify that by having some file that would normally require that you have elevated privileges. You will do that with sudo. You will see that it does not ask you for your password, and that works. Is anyone's workstation not in this state? So the two things you should have verified: Chef is installed, the ChefDK is installed, and that you have passwordless sudo. All right. No one has said anything, so I'm going to assume that we're good. What is your favorite text editor? What is your favorite command line text editor? Let me hear it. Yeah. Sublime? Command line text editor. I heard Vim. Sed. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I heard somebody say emacs. So this was on Twitter maybe a year and a half ago or something. How do you know if someone's an emacs user? They'll tell you. Don't worry, they will tell you. So I like Vim myself, but if you do a which Vim, guess what? Vim is not installed on this machine. So we're going to fix that. How might you fix that? With Chef. That's the right answer. That's the only answer I was looking for. With Chef. We're going to install Vim with Chef. So Vim is installed. Vim or VI? VI is not Vim, dude. Cool. VI is totally installed. I totally agree with you. I prefer Vim over VI. Why? Because that's what this lab calls for. But some of you do prefer Emacs, and that's cool. And maybe you're like, well, this whole command line stuff, I like to go super simple, and I want to use Nano. How many of you want to use Nano? No, I'm not going to ask that question because then others might ridicule you. Those others might be me, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, so which Vim is not installed? VI, totally installed. Absolutely, but we're not going to use that yet. So we're going to install Vim, but we're going to do it with Chef. But we're going to learn about our first Chef tool. And by first, I mean our second, because I talked to you about ChefDK already. There's this little utility or executable that you have called Chef Apply. How many of you have used Chef Apply before, of you Chef users? All right, like the dudes that work with me at Chef. I've used Chef Apply before, and one other person in the room. That's awesome. Okay, so Chef Apply is a little executable program that allows you to work with resources. So a resource is that thing and its state that we said within Chef. And Chef Apply is a great way to explore resources and kind of play around with them. Yes? I have the password. Yes, it's at SXP. I have no idea. I'll put it up though. Peter's going to give it to you. That's even better. So Chef Apply is a great way to explore resources that are available within Chef. Chef Apply is not the thing that you will use to manage your infrastructure when we're all said and done, but it is a tool that's going to be super helpful for you. So what you can do with most, maybe all Chef tools, they usually have pretty good help available to them. So let's go ahead and run chef-apply space --help, and you'll get a list of things that Chef will allow you to do. So with Chef Apply, you can feed or pass to Chef Apply the text of a recipe or a file that makes up a recipe. And Chef will apply that recipe to your system. Now, because our favorite text editor isn't installed, we don't want to write a file yet. We're just going to use this -e where we can pass some recipe text. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to run sudo chef apply -e, and then in quotes, package space, in single quotes, vim, and then close double quotes. If you prefer, you can swap vim for emacs, or you can swap vim for nano, or whatever other package you might like to install.
So one thing to mention, if you're not familiar with command line editors like vim or emacs, is to use nano.
Yes.
As you will be able to just use your arrow keys and have the menu at the bottom.
Absolutely. And if you're not familiar with command line editors, that's totally cool. We were all there at one point in our history. And we have people here that can help you, including your neighbor. And nano is the right one to start with. Well, it's the easiest one to start with. How about that?
Why does vim have to be single quotes?
Why does vim have to be in simple quotes? Okay, so let's break down exactly what's happening here. So with Chef Apply, we're going to pass to it a resource. So a resource within Chef is a thing, a piece of the system, and its desired state. So the thing, the type of resource that we have here is a package. So what we're really passing to Chef Apply -e is a string of the thing that we want to apply. So we're wrapping the whole thing in quotes. So package and vim, that's all in quotes. And then we're passing to the package resource. It has to have a name. So this is the name of the package that we want installed on the system. And so because we're writing code, it's a string, and so it's in quotes. Now we can put the whole thing in single quotes and then put vim in double quotes, like as long as we match up our pairs properly. Does that?
Not quite. I was just wondering, even if you did it the other way, why can't you just package name? That's it.
Yeah, sure. So we could do, like that, right? That's what you want to do. Here's the problem with that. It's going to fail. It's going to take a second to fail, but it's going to fail. Because vim, the interpreter is treating vim like a keyword or a variable, and it's not defined. So it doesn't know what vim is. There's no method or local variable named vim here, because what we've done is we've written code. And so the package is the resource. It has this type of resources package. It has a name that is associated with it. That name has to be a string.
That goes back to its Ruby underpinnings.
What's that?
That goes back to its Ruby underpinnings.
That goes back to its Ruby underpinnings, right? We're writing a programming language. It happens to be Ruby, but that doesn't, like, it matters, but it doesn't really matter yet. But it's a string that we have to pass to the name of the resource. Or as part of that resource definition, we provide the name as a string.
So let's go back.
Mm-hmm.
If there was some variable out there, you're saying that I could actually make use of that variable.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. And we could do that. Watch this. Here, we can do this. I could say export editor equals vim. Whoop, not vime, just vim, right? Because vime would probably fail also. All right, so now I have, I've just created a shell variable, right? I could do sudo chef apply -e, and now I want to pass in the thing that I want to do. I'm now writing some Ruby here. To be clear, I am doing this on the fly, and I'm not sure if it's going to work. All right, so when it fails, it's not my fault. But I have two ways that I'm thinking about I can do it. I think I want to do it like this, but then I still have to do quotes. But this is like Ruby. We're going to launch or read out to our shell and pull in that environment variable. Yeah, that looks good. Everybody think that looks good? Looks good to me. Let's see how that does. I'm just going to wait a second here. You must supply a name when declaring a package resource, which tells me that that came back as nil. So then I could try one other thing here, which I think actually kind of makes more sense. Let's see how that works. I probably still want it in quotes. Yeah. So what I've done here is show you that, yeah, you could totally use a variable, and you put that in quotes too, which is a lie, right? If this was a Ruby recipe that we wrote, it could be a variable, and I can show you how that would work. I'll do that with Emacs. Now that I have Vim installed, I can write around. I feel comfortable. So this is running. It's going to install Vim for me, and then once that's done.
Single quotes, I'm sorry. Right when it says
Yeah, that's going to work. It's doing it. Package Vim, it found it. So it says action install. So it's installing Vim. How many of you have Vim installed now? Everybody, I hope? Cool. What happens if you press your up arrow and hit enter? It's going to try to do that thing again, right? It'll do sudo chef apply -e package Vim. But it will happen faster this time for you. What happens when you run it the second time? You're like, yeah, it says that it's up to date. So it's not going to reinstall it. And this is a key thing to know about Chef. That with Chef, our resources work in what I like to call a test and repair fashion. Other people use big mathy words for it, but they're not always accurate, and so I stay away from the mathy words. So I like to call it test and repair. What will happen if I rerun this? I do the same thing. I'm going to install package Vim. Chef is going to first test the state of the system. My policy says the package Vim should be installed. The first thing I do is test the state of the system. Is the package installed? It is, so I will take no action. I will do nothing. So it only takes action when required. You may have heard other words that describe that process. I'm not going to use those other words. All right, but back to your question. How can I do this with a variable? So I'm going to, and you can do this along with me, or you can just watch, or whatever, but I'm going to create a file here. I'm going to call it editor.rb. It's a Ruby file. And in this, I'm going to set up a variable called editor. And I'm going to say that that is the string emacs. And then I'm going to define my package resource. So each resource has a type. This is a package. And then it will have a name, which will be a string. And I'm just going to say editor here. And then I'm going to write and quit that file. So now I can do sudo chef apply. And instead of the -e, I can just pass in the recipe that I'd like. So I'm going to pass in the editor.rb. Question?
Yes. Rather than writing the chef.rb file or the editor.rb file,
yes.
I'm going to pass that to you with a string and just put
yes.
Like multiple lines.
Oh, like to do multiple.
So chef apply -e and then do your double quote. Type the first line, which is where you set the editor variable. Drop down because you have it in.
Oh yeah, I could probably do something like that with a, yeah, maybe.
Just a quick notation.
Yeah.
Like a here doc or something.
Yep.
Similar.
I could probably just do it with semicolons also. I don't know. Play with that. But so here I have a variable in my script, in my recipe, and then I'm using that variable, and you can see that it's installing Emacs for me. Does that help clarify? Okay, good. You're like, dude, I got it like 3 minutes after you started talking about this. You didn't have to spend 10 minutes on it. But it's cool. Like it gave us, now I have Emacs also, so I'm happier. All right. So you could do Emacs, you could do Nano. What other packages might you like to have on your system? I don't know, but you can just install them all using chef apply, just like this. So our resources describe the desired state. Chef figures out how to get there. What happened under the covers? Who knows? What was the command that Chef ran to make Vim be there? Yum install Vim. How do you know it used Yum?
Well, because we're on Red Hat, it
It detected that we're on a Red Hat-based distribution. This operating system, which I didn't tell you, happens to be CentOS, the workstation that you're on. You maybe already sorted that out yourself because you're like, I'm a sysadmin, and the first thing I do after I log into a system is figure out what the fuck is the operating system, right? So that's cool. I didn't have to tell you. You just knew. But what if this had been an Ubuntu box? How would this have changed what we said to Chef? We wouldn't have said anything different to Chef. We would have still said package Vim. And Chef would say, oh, this is an Ubuntu system, so what I need to do is run an apt-get install Vim. So Chef abstracts away the tedium of that information for us.
But there's an assumption that baseline place on your system.
There is an assumption that I have an operating system laid down.
Well, in Yum configured, because without Yum.
And yes, like I have some package provider configured as part of my operating system. Absolutely. And if you didn't, like you could write some Chef recipes to configure your package provider before you try to install some package. Yeah. You could go all inception on it. And sometimes you can go from 0 to full things with Chef. And probably at the end of the day, I'll demo some of that for you.
I have a question about this recipe. Is this recipe can be dictated the order, or does it go from top to bottom? If I want to have this package installed before anything else.
Yes. So the question is, in my recipe, can I set up the order in which packages are installed, as an example? So the smarmy answer that I will give you is, dude, we're only installing one package, so of course that's like the order that it's going to happen in. But the real answer is, if we write a recipe, the way that Chef works with recipes, order matters. So if I pass, for example, like let me just demonstrate that very quickly here. So I'm going to go back into my editor RB file here, and I'm going to do package Vim. All right, so now I have two resources in this recipe, right? A package for Vim and a package for Emacs, or for whatever's in that editor variable, right? Yes? Clear? Good. Okay, I should write that, not just quit it. And then if I do chef apply and pass editor to that, what's going to happen is Chef is going to work through that recipe in order. So it's going to start with the first resource in my recipe, which is Vim. And it's going to test, is Vim installed? It is. It's going to see that it's up to date, and it's going to move on to the next recipe, or the next resource in my recipe. And that's going to be Emacs, and it will see that it's up to date. And guess what happens if I run it again? The same thing. And if I run it again, the same thing. And every time I run it, Chef will start at the top of my recipe and evaluate that resource, and then it will move on to the next resource, and then it will move on to the next resource. And what if I have something like this? Is there a package foo that's available from Yum? Who knows? I know that there's not, because I don't have like a special Yum repository set up with foo package in it. So Chef is going to apply this, and it's going to go in order. It's going to first install Yum, or check for Vim, and then it's going to check for foo. It's not going to find foo, so it's going to try to install foo. And what do you think is going to happen then? It's going to fail, and it's going to throw an exception. That's exactly right. Is it ever going to install Emacs or check for Emacs in this new recipe? It's not. It's not going to get to Emacs. As soon as it hits a failure, it's going to throw an exception and exit. It just takes a second to find out if package foo is there.
Paul, explaining that this question for this.
Yes.
Allow you to build logic to your Ruby file that would say, test this. If it's not there, continue so that I can.
Does it allow me to build logic into my Ruby file so that I can handle a case like this, or so that I can do anything that I like? Yeah, so here's the cool thing about your recipes. Your recipes are Ruby. So if you can do it in Ruby, you can do it in your recipe. So the short answer is yes, of course. You can do whatever you like within it. All right, so here it threw an exception because there is no package foo that's available, and so it just stops.
Another question on the order.
Yes?
Order of operations there. So that's within the executable recipe. If you have multiple recipes and in your run list, the order of operation is not necessarily.
So this is, you're jumping way ahead, but it's cool. Like the recipe question was also way ahead. But I'm going to answer it for you now, and then we're going to take a break. So if I have multiple recipes that get applied to my node, we store those recipes in a run list. Well, the run list is an ordered list of recipes. And they will be executed in the order in which they appear in the run list. So first recipe in the run list, we'll start at the top of that one, do all of its resources. Then we'll move on to the next recipe in the run list, do all of its resources, move on to the next, and so forth. Order with Chef. Order always matters. The order that you list things is the order in which they will happen. Yes?
If you have a long list of orders and things to run,
Yes?
that can be time consuming. I mean, isn't it taking away resources from the machine? And at what point you're not like running on cron, run this check and verify everything or anything.
Right. So the question was, well, if you have a lot of things to configure your machine, and guess what? You're going to have a lot of things to get your machine into its desired state. Isn't that taking away resources? Isn't it taking time and compute resources away from the machine while it goes through and verifies all of those things? The short answer is yes, of course it is. But and then you kind of follow that up with, like, do we really want to run Chef all the time, like every minute? Should Chef client be running, or should Chef be verifying that we're following the policy? My answer is yes, you should run Chef on a regular basis, probably not every minute, but probably on some sane interval. Now that sane interval, I can't tell you what the sane interval is for you. But here's the reason why you want to do that. Chef will make sure that your system stays in line with policy. Chef is not just about provisioning the machine, standing it up so that it's ready to go. But the thing that happens with machines, with your infrastructure over time, is the state of that machine changes. Maybe you logged into a machine and changed some file. Maybe something else caused a file or some service to stop or some package to get uninstalled or something, right? So Chef is going to manage that configuration drift for you. By continually executing, it will make sure that your machine, this machine, stays in line with policy. Now, is it going to take some resources from the machine? Sure it is. But we have tools that will help you sort of understand what do those resource loads look like, and it shouldn't really be an issue for you.
Yeah. So another question, I guess, or two was, would it make more sense for, like, if it was to do like every minute, just to do, let's say, for users, whereas likely for the rest of the environment setup. But the other question is, what if you take a machine and you want to have a rotation for investigation? Does that mean that you actually then you always have to do it through Chef? You can't just like say stop or remove some part of the file or something.
Gotcha.
Because automatically, boom, there's a possibility the next day you're screwed and went back in and.
Sure. Okay, so let's say you have a machine that's misbehaving and you want to do some diagnosis on it. And as you're diagnosing things and poking around, you might be changing some things. The last thing you want is for Chef to come in behind you and clean that up. That's basically the scenario that you laid out. So typically what you will do in those instances is you will go in and you will stop Chef from running. So the way that Chef works, when we're running with a server, so we haven't seen it yet, but there is typically a Chef server that stores all of our policy. and we have the chef client that will check in with the server and pull down the policies and then execute them, right? And so typically you will run your chef client on a regular basis so that it's always pulling the chef server to say, what does my policy look like right now? And then apply that policy, make sure that I'm in line with that policy. The thing that you would do if you got into that state where you needed to stop and troubleshoot and diagnose a machine, the first thing you might do is turn off the chef daemon or shut down that or comment out that cron job, stop that chef service so that it doesn't run. Do your troubleshooting, do whatever you need to do. When you're happy, you can then turn chef back on and it will pull down the latest policy. But chef, in the normal case, works in a pull mode, not in a push mode. So the server isn't going to go out and say, oh, no, you have to do this. It's always the client that's pulling down. Does that help?
The other first question was, is there a way to do the full mode where you're just
Yes. So then the other part of the question was, but can I do a pull mode where I don't want policy to be validated every time, but every couple of minutes I want this slice of the policy validated. So you could set up a separate cron that says every 10 minutes run chef client with just this run list. And do it as a one-time thing, validate these things are good, and then maybe nightly I have the full run list that gets applied. Yeah, so you could totally set that up. All right. What other questions can I answer for you? All right, so just before we take a quick break here, we've just seen resources. Resources with Chef work the same way. Basically, all resources work the same way. If you go to docs.getchef.com, there's a link here at the top called resources, or I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom, and you will see a section here called resources. And this section lists all of the resources that come built in with Chef. So you can see, and you can click around in the docs and start to explore a bunch of these things if you like, and we're going to talk about a bunch of them as we go through the day. But the way that a resource works, always, is you define the type of resource that you want, the state that you want that resource to be in. When Chef encounters that resource, it will test to validate that that resource is in the desired state. If it is not, it will take the necessary action to fix that resource, to bring it in line with policy. So with our package, we just saw that, and here if I click on the package resource, you'll see that there's a bunch of words, and then there's this section here called actions. And the actions are actually the desired state for that resource. So the desired state for this resource could be install, upgrade, reconfig, remove, or purge. And you can see there that the default action is to install this thing. So we said package vim. We could have just as easily said, well, maybe not just as easily, but we could have instead said package vim do action install end. So this action is the default action. It tells us that in the docs. And so the second version here, where I just have package editor, we're just using the implicit action here to install it. In the first one, where I have package vim action install, we're being more explicit in our policy. I want this package to be installed. That is the desired state of this machine. Okay, so that's your quick intro to resources, the fundamental building blocks within Chef. Everything comes down to resources, and then there are abstraction layers and other tooling built up around the resources that allow you to model and manage your infrastructure. What I'd like to do now is take a 10-minute break. So I have 11:10. So at 11:20, I'd like to get started again, and we'll pick up with with recipes. Good? All right, break. The restrooms. That's important. These doors and turn to the left. Walk right past the escalators, and then they're on your left, maybe on your left or right. For all the guys in the room, it's on your left when you get back there. I think the ladies, it's on the right when you get back there, but it'll be obvious.
quick question: when you're doing installing the packages,
Yeah.
does Chef heavily rely on the Yum repositories, or you have to have them preset before?
You can use Chef to define those repositories.
Oh, you
for
can?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
I'll get a session for that.
We're going until 5 o'clock. Yeah.
I want these my network, and I want out of those 10, at least 4 in this configuration. And one of them by dynamically, another one is
Yeah, there's a resource here. But basically, so I can make sure that all lines are index 20. They say yeah. So what will happen is you'll have a
oh, I need to change that number to 50. And it's the way that you said that it's always a full model, right? How does this thing work? How the other one?
Sort of inherent. The client dies. The client scratch out. You will re-execute.
I want to
that's
see this.
Yeah.
I want to die. But I don't know. Don't be the client second.
Yeah, so the server is the provision of the database. You can certainly build in some logic into your recipe that says if you get contact information instead, you need updates.
Anything that controls
Yes. Gotcha.
Guys, it's just warm in here. You're good?
Now I think most people are staying awake, which is good. Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah. My philosophy with training classes is that you can never reach a goal.
I know.
When they complain about getting to goal, I say work harder. You'll work
Run
harder,
around.
right?
Run around.
Exactly. Even faster. Even faster.
Yeah.
It's really works.
Yeah, I don't think anybody else should be using it.
All right, let's go ahead and get started again. So as we come back, I'd like to thank you for the questions that you've been asking. They totally take us a little bit off of where we are and push us a little bit ahead, but hopefully it's been helpful for you. It makes it more fun for me because even though this is the first time I'm delivering this course, I know what every slide says. So I'd much rather have the questions. That makes it more interesting for me. And frankly, we're all here to make it more interesting for me because that's what matters most, right? All right, so now that we know a little bit about resources, we're going to talk about the next piece of Chef that sort of builds on top of resources, and that thing is called recipes. So we named the framework Chef, and so we get to have all these fun names like recipes, and maybe later we'll see knife, and cookbooks, and things like that. So recipes are really just a collection of resources. So let's talk about our next lab that we're going to do. And actually, before we talk about this next lab, I want to say something that I'm going to repeat throughout the day. The labs that we do are relatively simple. And they're simple for a purpose. They're simple so that we can expose you to some of the various parts of Chef. What they are not show, for example, in this case, we want a web server configured to serve up our home page. What we are not teaching you in this class is the right way to stand up a web server, the right way to manage your home page, the right way to manage your website. We're not teaching you that. We're teaching you how you can use Chef to define some things. And the intent or the ask of you is that you take these concepts that we're laying out and these ideas, and you think about how do these apply in my infrastructure. So although the thing that we're going to do next, stand up a home page running on a web server, it's going to be relatively simple in terms of the things that we have to type. And it isn't really going to apply to any of the problems that you have back at work right now. But I want you to just think about the tools that we're using to solve this particular problem, and how might you extend or expand that and your understanding of that and apply that to your own problems. And if you have questions about, like, I don't really grok how this would apply to the thing that I need to do, which is that, then describe that, and we have people in the room that can help you get from, like, simple homepage to that. Fair? Good enough. All right, so here's our next task. We have this machine now, our workstation. It's got a proper text editor installed, so we're happy. But now we want it to be a web server configured to serve up our home page. We'll know we're done when we can go and see our home page in a web browser. And of course, we're going to use everyone's favorite web browser. Curl, exactly. No, you can actually use a real web browser also, but the slides will show us all curl. And either he looked ahead in the slides, which he wasn't supposed to do, or he's just a badass and he knows curl is the best web browser that's out there. Or if someone else looked ahead in the slides and gave him the answer, maybe it sounds like that is the real case. All right, so what's our desired state? So our desired state is that we will see our homepage in a web browser. You guys, you don't need to know Chef to answer this next question for me. What resources will we need? What do we have to do to see a homepage in a web browser on this machine? Sorry? We need some sort of web engine or some sort of web server package. Okay, so what might we use for that? Apache? Yeah, we're going to use Apache, and all of you that are like, the fuck, I want to use Nginx, it's totally better. That's cool, but we're going to use Apache, because this is not how do you run a website, this is how do you use Chef to model your infrastructure. So we're just going to stick with trusty old Apache. What else do we need? So we have to have an Apache web server. We have to have some sort of web server technology running. What else do we need to meet our desired state? A file. We need a homepage, right? So we're at least going to look at a package resource, which you've already seen, and we're also going to look at some way to manage files within Chef. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about recipes. So a recipe is a collection of resources. Typically, your recipes will map one-to-one to a piece of software or a piece of functionality within your infrastructure. So you might have something that will stand up our web page, and that's what we're going to look at now. So on your workstation, what I'd like you to do is make a new directory in your home directory called Learn Chef, and then we're going to go lab 2 will be the thing that we're going to create there. So I'm going to do the same, and you can watch as I go. Let's see. I'm going to, actually, before I do that, no, not before I do that. All right. Wow, that's good. I just exhaled really loudly into the microphone. Did everybody enjoy that? That was fun. More fun for you than it was for me, believe me. So we're going to make dir. Lovely. Learn Chef. What did I call it? Lab 2, right? All right. And then I'm going to just move into that directory. So here we want to create a recipe that's going to get our web server up and running for us. So I'm going to do a vim apache.rb. Okay, so I'm in Learn Chef Lab 2. I'm creating a file called apache.rb. The first thing we know we need is a web server installed and running for us, right? So how do I get Apache installed here? What should I type? See, you thought I was gonna teach you, but you're gonna help me. So what should I type? Package. HTTPD. Quote. Quick question: does the quotes matter? Can it be single or double? Who knows? You do or you don't believe it can be single? You think it can be single? Who thinks it can be single quotes here? You're right. Who thinks single quotes are better here? Yeah, whatever, you're wrong. It doesn't really matter. And if it does matter to you, you're caring about the wrong things, dude. So package HTTPD. What is this going to do for us?
Default, which is to install the package.
Right. So when I execute this, is it going to install the package HTTPD for me? Is it?
Well, if we do -e, then yes.
Now, if you did -e, it would, right? But let's say we run this recipe. Will it install HTTPD for us?
No.
Yes? No? Maybe.
Well, it'll do the default action, which is install.
Yeah, the default action is to install, but will it install HTTPD for us? The answer is maybe. Why is the answer maybe? If it's already installed, what's it going to do? It's going to say it's already there. It's up to date, right? So, exactly. It might install it for us. In this case, the first time we run this, it is totally going to install it for us because we don't have it there yet. Let's see. What else did we say we needed? We need a file of some sort. So let's go look at some things and sort out what kind of file we're going to have. I have to skip ahead some slides because I think, yeah, there we go. This is the this is the slide I wanted to jump. Oh, God. Sometimes I can't PowerPoint like that time. This is, I think, this is the slide I want to be on. Take me there. All right. Okay, so we want to write a file. We have to decide which resource we're going to use. So as it turns out, if you look at the resources on the docs page, there are a bunch of resources that might help us manipulate files. There's a resource called a cookbook file. There's one called a file. There's one called a remote file. And there's one called a template. Well, to meet our minimum criteria, we're just going to use the file resource. So a file resource can manage files on your system. It will make sure that the file exists on that system for you and that its contents are correct. When it comes to the file resource, of course, it has some actions specified. And our default action for a file is going to be to create it. So I can specify an action, but I don't necessarily need to. Of course, I have other actions that are laid out there. Can I pause for a minute and have a little rant? Guess what? I'm going to pause for a minute and have a little rant. So Chef had, the creator of Chef, I love the dude, but sometimes I hate him. Here's why I hate him. He uses keyword action. And the problem with the keyword action goes back to that, will it install Apache for us? Will it install HTTPD or not for us? The problem with the keyword action is when you read that word action and you speak English and your mind translates that, that tells you it's going to do something. It's going to do that thing. It's going to take that action, which isn't really necessarily the case. It's only going to take that action if this resource is outside of its desired state. So how many of you used Puppet before? I've used Puppet before also. Puppet has a much better word for this. What's their keyword that's like action? Who can tell me? Ensure. Ensure, right? I think ensure is a much better keyword. That's the only thing I like better about Puppet. Because whatever. I'm going to stop digging, because when you get yourself into a hole, the first thing you do is stop digging. All right, so files also have attributes associated with them. One of the attributes is content. And the content can be your recipe or in your file. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to add a file resource to my recipe, because that's what I want. So tell me what to type. It's a file resource, so what should I type first? File. Thanks. And then each resource type has a name. So does anyone have a guess what the name of a file might be?
Index.html.
It might be index.html. That's mostly true. And I might put that in quotes. But here's the thing about a file. When we specify its name, it should be the full path of that file. So where on disk should this exist? Yes?
Can you also just use the path?
You could use the path attribute. You could, absolutely. And we can maybe look at it both ways. So I'm just going to create a file called var www html index.html. So if I specify the full name of this file, this is the file on disk that it's going to manage. Now, I know that I have to provide the content for it. So whenever I want to specify attributes for a resource or actions for a resource, we saw this already, I wrap them inside a do and an end. So at the end of this line, I'm going to type the keyword do. And then on the next line, I'm going to type the word end. And then I'm going to go here, and I'm going to type in some attributes. And then go back and insert a line in between before the end. Why did I do that? Because otherwise I'm stupid and I'm going to forget to close it. And I'm not saying that if you ever forgot an end, I'm stupid, because I often forget my end. So I'm going to type that in first, because that's the thing that you do. And then I did this other thing before I type in the thing. So the attribute that I want here is content. But I indented content. Why do I indent content? Does Ruby care? So, sorry, forget Ruby. Does Chef care? So Chef, these recipes that we're writing, these are Ruby recipes, the keyword content. Does Ruby care about white space? Anyone know? It does not care about white space. Do you know who cares about white space? I care about white space, and you should care about white space too. And I indented the keyword content with 2 spaces. And if you set up your editor properly, when you hit the tab key, it will insert 2 spaces, not a tab. And if you do anything other than 2 spaces when you try to indent, then you're doing. But it doesn't really matter. But it really, 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 really matters. So that's 2 spaces, content. And the content that we're going to pass, we're just going to. I didn't say what our homepage needs to be. I just said it needs to be our homepage. So I'm going to do just an H1, and I'm going to say hello world. And then I'm going to close off my H1. And then just to keep things a little bit cleaner, I'm going to add a \n there just to drop a new line in that file so that when I curl it, it looks a little bit better, or if I cat the file, it looks a little bit nicer. So that's what I have. I've created or installed my package, and I've managed the contents of the file. Look good? Everybody got this? I'm going to give you 1 more minute or less to finish typing this, and then we're going to run this recipe. All right, that time is up, so I'm going to write and quit this file. How do I apply this recipe to this machine? Chef apply, and then I'm going to pass in the name of the recipe. Do I need the -e? No. Will it work if I pass -e? It will not. If I pass -e, Chef will say, okay, I'm going to execute apache.rb, that thing. I don't know what apache.rb means. I want it to read the file and execute the contents of that file. Now, I also need to run it as sudo. Why do I need to run it as sudo? Yeah, in this case, I need the permissions to install the package, right? The Chef user can't just go willy-nilly installing packages. So I'm going to do sudo chef apply apache.rb. Oh, but before I do that, I'm going to do one other thing. I want to prove to you that it isn't working. So I'm going to open up my home page with my web browser. So curl localhost, could not connect. So now I'm going to sudo chef apply apache.rb. And so what is this going to do? The first thing it's going to do is it's in our file. What's the first resource? The package resource. And it's going to look for package HTTPD. It's going to inspect the system. Does package HTTPD exist already on the system? Is it currently installed? And it will see that it is not. And so it is going to take the action and install it. And then it's going to move on to our next resource, which was a file. And it's going to see, is there a file named var www html index.html? And it will then write out that file. So now I can curl and see my home page, right? Stupid Chef. Why isn't it working?
Didn't start it.
I didn't what?
Didn't start.
I didn't start what?
The HTTP.
Oh, I didn't start the service. Why doesn't it just start for me? That's what it does on Ubuntu. Fuck. I hate CentOS. I don't really. When I have mistakes, they're intentional. You should always remember that. I tell everyone I work with the same thing. When I make mistakes, it was intentional. It was a learning moment. So we should start the service. How do we start up this service here? What should I add to my recipe? I could execute. Yeah, sure. I could do an execute. How would I execute it? How would I execute a bash command? I just gave you the answer.
Backtick, service.
Oh yeah, I could do backtick. Yeah, sure. Why not? Service. Then what? Start.
HTTPD start.
I think it's start HTTPD, right? What do you think? Look good?
No.
We should probably use the notify to restart on the package install.
Oh boy, that sounds dicey. So this we'll talk about that maybe. But also, well, I'm already So like, will this work? Will this do what I want it to do? Maybe. Let's try it.
The thing that was really weird is if you always keep them this way, then you're always going to start HTTP.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Can you hold that thought for 1 second? Because you're right. And this isn't the way we're actually going to do it. But, I mean, it'll work, right? Chef apply, apache.rb. Oh, unrecognized service. So that was, I lied when I said it would work. So, because, of course, curl is still not working for us. So which service? Maybe I should run an sbin service, right? Oh, of course. So like the thing that you told me, and you were like, no, dude, it should be HTTPD, and I was like, no, dude, it should be start, and then it should be HTTPD. That was totally on purpose. Just like I told you, every time when I make a mistake, it's on purpose. And when I call you out for making a mistake, even though you were not making a mistake, that's also on purpose. I'm an asshole, aren't I? All right, so I'm going to try it again. Let me sudo chef apply apache.rb. Guess what's going to happen now? Let's see. It checks my package. Let's see, it's already installed, so it's going to tell me that it's up to date. All right, what happens if I curl? It works. It's brilliant, right? So we totally fixed it. It's totally working. But there is a problem. What's the problem? What if I run it again? I don't know what's going to happen. Let's find out if I run it again. Because I said earlier that when you're typically applying Chef, you're not going to use Chef apply, you're going to use the Chef client that's going to inspect your policy and run it over and over. It's going to run and apply that policy repeatedly. Let's see what happens this time. That kind of without failure, and curl still works, so that's kind of okay, right? But it seems weird because, like you said, what's happening every time is we're telling HTTPD to start. What if HTTPD is already running? It's like if I did sudo service HTTPD start. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to just continually do that, does it? Because it's running, right? So there must be a better way to do this that's more chefy. Yes?
So isn't there an ordering problem? The first time you have the package installed, you're going to the backtips first.
Oh, yeah, dude, but that's like way advanced. Yes, you're absolutely right. This will totally hose us if we did it like that. Yeah. But that's like, and everyone's like, wait, if that's so advanced, I totally want to know what you're talking about there. That's interesting. So, and now I have to answer it because I've spent enough time like saying why I can't answer the question because it's black magic and scary. It's not really black magic and scary, but there is a little bit of an ordering thing that happens. That Ruby code will actually be executed before any of our resources will get applied. And so the first time I run this, it will try to start service HTTPD before the package is even installed. And you're like, wait, but you said order matters, and it does matter, but there are two different phases of the ordering, and the Ruby code gets executed first, and then our resources get applied. And so the Ruby code, that backtick, that's just Ruby code. So that would be executed first. And if you're still like, whoa, I still don't really understand what you mean, it's cool. Talk to me at lunch, and I'll explain it all. Or wait till the end of the day, and maybe I'll have slides about it. I have slides about it. They're not in this deck, but we can talk about it. All right, so I think, are we all convinced that this is the wrong way to do it? If you're not, this is the wrong way to do it. Totally works, but it works this time, but not the way we want to do it. It's not very chefy to just execute some command like this. How else might we get the same results? So I'm gonna comment that out. Speaking of, how many of you are Ruby developers before you walked in today? Cool. So I'll teach you all the Ruby you need to know as we go. I just taught you a little bit of Ruby. To make a comment in Ruby, you put a hash mark at the beginning of your line, and then the rest of that line is commented, or wherever mark, from that point on, it's a comment. So that Ruby will ignore it. The interpreter will ignore it. How do you make a multi-line comment in Ruby? Star slash? No. Anyone else?
Begin.
Yeah, you know what no Rubyist ever does? Begin. So the way that you make a multi-line comment in Ruby is you put a hash in front of multiple lines in your file. That's how you do it. So in Ruby, like there is a different way to do it, but no one ever uses. Who's a Ruby developer and has used the begin end for comments ever? Yeah. I didn't believe it was true until a student told me that one time when I taught the class, and I called bullshit, much like I did earlier, and I was proven wrong. It happens all the time. It's cool. All right, so I'm not going to do this to get my service started. How shall I get my service going in a more chefy way? A service resource. Right, I have a service resource. Wow, and I can sometimes type. So what do you think I should pass to this service resource? HTTPD as a string. Just for shits and giggles, I'm going to do it in single quotes because I did it in double quotes before, and I just want to prove that it works either way. All right, is that good? It should work, right? Let's try that. But before I try that, I want to take us back. I want to go back in time to where we were before we tried the backtick service starty thing. So I'm going to do a sudo service HTTPD stop, because in reality that service wasn't running when we ran our recipe the first time. So now if I do the make with the curl, right, can't connect. So I'm gonna sudo chef apply my thing. What's gonna happen this time? Is it gonna start up Apache for me? It should, right? So the package install, it's gonna check that. See what happens here. It's going to tell me that the package is up to date. It says the service is there and then the file is there, but what happens when I curl? I still can't connect. Why can't I connect? Because I did not define an action for my service. Look at the service action. The service action was nothing. So in other words, Chef just made sure that the service, well, I don't care. I'm not going to do anything with that service. So I did that thing, and it was nothing, and so now the service still isn't started. So I'm going to go back into my Apache, and how am I going to fix that? What do you think? What am I going to type here? Do. And then what am I going to type next? End, right. And then what am I going to type here? 4 spaces? Get the fuck out. 2 spaces. And then what am I going to type here? I think somebody said action. And then what? Colon start. What's up with those colons? Symbols. So there's some Rubyists in the room. Okay, so sometimes in Ruby we have these things called symbols, and they look like variable names except they start with a colon. Here's what you need to know about symbols. If I use a symbol, you use a symbol. That's what you need to know about symbols. And you don't even need to remember that they're called symbols. All you need to know is that it's this funky variable-looking thing that starts with a colon. Those of you that want to know more, symbol is a memory-efficient way of storing. And I just said it sounded like a foreign language to you. You're a Rubyist, and you're like, yeah, but there's other things that it also means that you should tell them about. I'm not going to. So that's cool. If I use it, you use it. Can we all agree to that? Yeah, except when I use it wrong but meant to use it right, you should use it right, not the way I used it wrong. If we can also agree to that, everyone wins. All right, I'm going to quit this file. Of course, I'm going to write it first, and then I'm going to make with the chef apply again. I'm going to execute that recipe again. So this time, it's going to go through and check, is HTTPD installed? It is, it's up to date. Is the service in a state where it is started? It is not, so it is going to start that service. And then is the file accurate? And it will say that the file is accurate. And now when I curl, I get hello world. So that's pretty awesome. All right. What happens if, let's say, you're going to have to go with me. This is a little bit of a journey here. This is a big stretch. Let's say that I have some monitoring set up on my website, and if my homepage says hello world, it throws an error, and it pages me at 3 a.m. Well, I fixed that. It's not supposed to say hello world. So what am I going to do? I'm going to SSH into this box, and I know how to fix it. I'm going to go here and I'm going to do sudo vim var www html index.html, and I'm going to change world to the thing that I want it to be. And the thing I want it to be is you, like that. I want it to say hello you, because our website is personalized. And that's why my monitors were throwing off errors. And so now when I curl, it says hello you. My monitor just turned green. I can go back to bed. It's lovely. I just fixed that problem, right? But what's wrong with that?
The chef running is going to forward your file.
Right. So Chef client should be running on a regular basis, and we don't have it running right now, but we can simulate that. We can do a sudo, yeah, the chef apply. So now when I apply apache.rb, what's going to happen? So when Chef comes back along, I'm going to get woken back up because now my website is busted again. So this is a problem. And a key learning, when we need to change something, we need to change the policy. And you'll see here in the output, you will see it better in your output than in my output until I highlight it. But the output that Chef gives me is it says, hey, it changed hello you back to hello world. Now my monitor's gone red again, or green again, or whatever. Like I should have changed the monitor. Like the way that you address an alert at 3 a.m. is you turn the monitor off. You don't fix the problem. That's the right way to address things at 3 a.m., right? Turn the monitor off. Yeah. Don't wake me up again. All right. Let's see. So the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm just so the reason I have this Surge Introduction to Chef directory, and the reason that I'm in that directory is because I previously cloned it from the repos, because I told you that I was going to put the code that I wrote right onto GitHub as we go. And so I need to do that. You don't have Git installed on your workstation yet, but of course you could install it. I'm not going to tell you how, but if you do it without using Chef, I will be disappointed. And so you can do it or not. I'm just going to do a git add learn chef, and then I'm going to git commit. This is lab 2. I don't know. We'll call right. So I also have to add like my git stuff to not get errors, but git pull. See, I don't want to teach you Git. This is why I'm not telling you what's happening here, but if you're watching, you're just laughing at me because you know. There we go. Git. Wow. Push. Make the push. There we go. Okay, so now that lab 2 is pushed up to the GitHubs, and I have slides that talk about all this stuff. I want to review our slides and make sure that I talked about all the key points that I wanted to. We did that. Yep. Okay. So of course the right way to fix that error at 3 a.m. is not to turn off the alert. It's not to SSH into the machine on your own. It's to go and change your policy, update the policy so that the right thing happens. Start with your code repository. All right, but here's another thing, right? We're treating our infrastructure as code. One of the things that we do in proper applications when we're writing code is we separate data from policy or data from flow. Right now it's kind of janky. We have the homepage contents directly within our recipe. To me, that just feels wrong. Does that feel wrong to anyone else? The right answer is yes, it feels wrong to you. So I want to get that out of there. I want to get that content out of the recipe and store it somewhere else so that I can manage it independently of my policy. And so we can manage that content separately using a number of different files. We can use a cookbook file, a number of different resource types. We could use a cookbook file, we could use a remote file, or we could use a template. Now a cookbook file is going to be static content, that we store within our cookbook. And we haven't really defined what a cookbook is yet, but a cookbook is we'll say, hey, go get the page from over there and like download that thing. Or we can use a template. What we're going to use is a template, because a template, in this particular case, a template is an ERB file. ERB stands for Embedded Ruby. And so it's just a templating language that we have within Chef, ERB. And it will allow us to generate files based on some variable content and some logic that we can throw into those ERB templates. But now we have another problem, because you see, Chef-Apply is a great way to explore resources, but Chef-Apply is kind of stupid. It doesn't understand recipes, and it doesn't understand, well, it understands recipes, it doesn't understand cookbooks. And the thing is, it can only load one file at a time. So it can load up my recipe, but if I want to store somewhere else, it can't do that. So I need to graduate beyond Chef-Apply, and what we're going to talk about next is Chef Client, and we're going to create a cookbook. So cookbooks are for recipes and supporting files. The cookbooks within Chef are like a little package. So if you've written Ruby before, maybe you package things up as gems. Similar idea. Each cookbook can have 0 or more recipes. We'll have a version number associated with it. We'll have a name. We'll have files and templates. Can have libraries, data attributes, all kinds of stuff that we can put into a cookbook. But essentially, we'll take this, package it up. It will have all of the settings that we need, and then we can use that as a package that we distribute to various places. So typically, you'll have cookbooks that map one-to-one to a piece of software functionality. So you'll have the MySQL cookbook, or the Apache cookbook, or the user's cookbook, or something like that. So with infrastructure as code, we're packaging this code up into distributable units. Those are called cookbooks. We version them, and the good thing is that we should separate, or the thing that we want to do here is separate the policy. So our policy says that the web server should have a home page. That's the policy. But the data is the specific content that should be on that home page. We want to manage those two things separately, and Chef allows us to do that. Excuse me. So here's what we're going to do in Lab 3. We're going to manage the homepage content separately. We want to move it off to a different file so that it can be stored on its own. But before we do that, I have to go off on a tangent. Because what we're about to do is create a cookbook. That cookbook needs to live in some sort of source code repository somewhere. Because we're professionals and we keep our code in source code repositories. We're going to create a repository called a chef repo. We're going to call this directory chef-repo, and it's going to be the repository for all of our chef code moving forward. I mentioned earlier that the proper version control system that you should use is Git, and you can use any version control system you want, of course. You can use version as long as you use Git SVN. You can use Perforce as long as you use the Git Fusion module. It's all totally good. As long as you're using Git, you're fine. That's totally a lie. You don't have to use Git. But the Chef community, the people that use Chef on a regular basis, all really have a strong tendency or preference for Git. And you'll see that there's a lot of tooling within the Chef community that utilizes Git functionality and works really well with that. So Git is probably the right thing to do. But now we have this other question that comes up a lot in the Chef community, and maybe you haven't even thought of this question yet, but I have more than one cookbook. Once I have more than one cookbook, how many repos should I have? And the answer is easy. It depends. There are basically two options that you'll find commonly within the Chef community. You may have a monolithic repository where you store all of your Chef bits in the same repository, or you may treat your Chef code as independent software projects. And I'll just define what that means here in a second. So in the monolithic repository, it's super easy to rock. We take anything having to do with Chef and we put it into the Chef repo. There's one repository. It has all of our policy files, which include our cookbooks, our environments, our roles, and so forth. If I have external dependencies, I will manage those in the monolithic repository pattern. I will manage those as vendor branches within my repository. And if you're like, what are built-in vendor branches? It's cool. Like, we're not even going to talk about them today other than I'm going to mention them now, and then we'll move on. But if you want to discuss that more later, just grab me and we'll do so. But external dependencies essentially get put into the same repository. So all of your stuff for Chef is in this one monolithic repo. That's one way of managing your Chef. The other way to do it is to treat your cookbooks as independent software projects. And in this particular model, what you do is you will create a separate Git repository for each one of your cookbooks. So if I have a cookbook for Apache, a cookbook for users, and a cookbook for MySQL, that's 3 different repositories that I will have. And then I'll probably have a 4th repository for the rest of my chef stuff, like roles and environments, and data bags, and other things that we haven't mentioned yet. The nice thing about this process is that, or this pattern, is that each one of your cookbooks can truly be treated as an independent, self-contained software project. You can build up test suites around just this cookbook without having to run your test suite across your entire repository. Your external dependencies are treated as artifacts. So if you rely on some other cookbook for your cookbook to work, you just use that as an artifact. And it's stored separately, you load it in, and that's how you manage it. So you can use either one of these cookbook patterns. These repository patterns. And some of you might be like, I just want to use Chef. Can we not talk about Git and repos and what should my strategy be? And yeah, that's cool. We're not really, I mean, we're going to use it a little bit, but it doesn't really matter as far as getting to it today. Yeah, so that's some stuff I wanted to say about repositories. And the key thing there is that we're going to create a repository here in a minute, so we're going to have to decide, do we want to go the independent software projects repository route, or do we want to go the monolithic repo route? And I'll just give you an answer, and you can just use that answer and not have to think, and that's cool. But first we need to create our repo. And in order to create our repo, I'm going to introduce you to another tool. So we've looked at ChefApply. We know that ChefApply isn't smart enough to deal with cookbooks. So I need to use something else. And I need to create a software repository, source code repository for all of my Chef code. The Chef development kit comes with a command line utility called Chef. So after you've installed Chef, you can use Chef, or after you've installed the ChefDK, you can use this. The Chef utility has a bunch of generators in it that will allow you to generate things for your Chef code, including your Chef repository. So let's go back to what are we trying to do with our lab here. So the first thing we want to do, or the thing we want to do, is we want to store our homepage content in some separate repository. And we're going to do that by creating a cookbook. So to create a cookbook, before we can create a cookbook, we need to create a Chef repository, a place to store this cookbook. And so we're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to install Git on our workstation so that you can check in your code as you go. And if you'd rather not check in your code as you go, you don't have to. It's fine. You can skip that part. And we'll create a Chef repo, and then we'll create the Apache cookbook. So let's go ahead and check out what the Chef tool can do for us. So here's what I'm just going to do this live. Also, right. So Chef. If we do chef-help, you'll see what the Chef tool can do for you. And of course, I have my font super huge, so you can't actually see anything that it said. So let me switch back. Oh, it's not on the slide, so I won't switch back to that slide yet. One of the things that the Chef tool can do for you is it can generate things. It can generate apps, cookbooks, and so forth. So I'm going to do a chef generate --help and see what can the Chef tool generate for me. And that will show me what's here on this slide. With the Chef tool, I can generate an app, a cookbook, a recipe, a template, a file, an LWRP, or a repo. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to just look at the help for that. So if you do chef generate repo --help, here's what happens. You can specify a repo name, and it will generate a Chef repo for you. And I'm going to do this in just a second. The key thing, there are a couple of questions, though, that before we run this command that we should answer. First, are you going to store this repository in Git? And so for today, it doesn't really matter. But in the real world, of course, the answer is yes. So if you want to put your stuff in Git today, that's totally cool. You should install Git. And you should know how to do that without much assistance. By using Chef, of course. And then you need to answer the question of which type of repository will you use, monolithic or an independent software project. Here's the hint. I'm going to have you use an independent software project workflow or pattern or whatever. I am going to not do this, but it's in the slides and you can see it. The first thing that I did or thought about doing was installing Git. So to install Git, I just created a lab3 and a git.rb, and I put into it package Git. And then the other thing that I did that I should probably do actually is manage a file with Git so that it sets up my username and my email address so that when I do commit stuff to Git, it knows who I am, which is probably a good thing to do. You could also do this with like git config commands, but of course it's easier just to drop that stuff into the file. But that's a little thing, and it's already set up on my workstation, so I'm not even going to do it. But let's assume that everyone has Chef or Git installed. Let's go ahead and create our Chef repository. So to create your Chef repository, the first thing I want you to do is go to your home directory. So go all the way back home or cd to tilde, and you should be at /home/chef. You can do a pwd to make sure that you're there. And then we're going to do this thing. So I am not at home, but it's because I want to check my stuff in to Git so you can all see it. I'm going to use chef generate repo. I'm going to call this repo chef-repo. And I'm going to use a -p. -p says this is a policy-only repository, which means that each one of my cookbooks are going to be managed as independent software projects. I'm going to have separate cookbooks, sorry, separate repositories for each one. Now here's the funny thing, or the cool thing about Chef. When the Chef command executes, guess what it uses to execute its tasks? It uses Chef. So it's kind of meta here. We're going to use the Chef tool that's going to execute some Chef to create a Chef repository. The thing about people that work at Chef is we like to say the word Chef a lot. We like it so much that our company used to be called OpsCode, but we renamed it to Chef so that we could say Chef more frequently. So I now have this repository here called Chef Repo. So let's go ahead and cd into Chef Repo. And from here, what you probably want to do, if you have Git installed, is we can run a git status in this, and it says, oh, I'm on, yours probably says not installed. So you probably want to do a git init, git init, and then hit enter, and it will add that thing. I'm not going to do that because I already have a git thing installed, but I'm going to git add my Chef repo. And then I'm going to git commit -m, the initial Chef repo. And then I'm going to git push it so that it's up on the GitHubs for anyone that's grabbing stuff from there. All right, so now I'm going to go back into my Chef repo. And I want to just show you quickly the difference between that -p and not the -p. So if I had run that chef generate chef repo, let's just look at what it does in the git ignore file. So the git ignore file tells Git which things to ignore. And so you see that when I use the -p, it says ignore anything under cookbooks unless it's the cookbooks README file. So now if I create a new file under cookbooks, the Git repository will not store that because this repository is for the policy only. And so policy only, what does that mean? Well, if we list the contents here, you'll see that I have things like environments and roles and certificates and a README. These are all part of my policy. Cookbooks are not going to be stored within this particular repository. But enough about that. Let me pause here. What questions can I answer for you about creating a Chef repository?
So the first file created with that where we were installing HTTP. Can we do regex based on host names? Like, I want HTTP on these systems, but not on these systems.
We will answer that soon enough. Yeah. What other questions can I answer for you about creating a chef repo? Yes, and then I'll go here. Okay.
I get the whole thing about recipes, but at what point does it cookbook or repo?
Okay, so a recipe is just a collection of resources, right? The thing that we want to do here is we want to manage the home page as a separate file, not as part of the recipe. So it's part of the recipe because it's the thing that we want to manage, but I don't want to manage it within the recipe.rb file, right? So I create a cookbook, which is a package. It's a defined directory structure that has a directory for all of my recipes, and we'll see if it can have another directory for my templates or for my files. But then I can take that cookbook and package it together and use that as a distributable package that I'll share or I'll publish to a chef server that I can share with the community, like that.
So that's the cookbook.
That's a cookbook.
And that's a repo is just a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, the repo is the Git repository or the source code repository where I'm storing all of my chef data, all of my policy data, which includes all of it. Yes. Okay. So I have resources, they get put into recipes, recipes live within cookbooks, our cookbooks live within a chef repo.
I was just had a question about Git. At this stage, we have not yet visualized this.
Yes, you have not initialized it. Mine already was. So you do git space init, enter, and it will initialize that as a repo. And then you do git add dot, and then you can git commit, and there you go. You can't git push unless you've configured some remote thing already. All right. So what I want to do next is I want to create a cookbook for Apache, and then we'll take a break for lunch. How does that sound? Yeah. All right. So to generate a cookbook, what do you think I'm going to use to generate a cookbook? Chef, of course. So from my chef repo, I'm going to cd into cookbooks. So my current working directory is tilde or home/chef repo/cookbooks. And from here, I'm going to use chef to generate a cookbook. So I can do chef generate cookbook --help, and you should do that. Like, let's sort out what can we do with the chef tool to generate a cookbook. Let me jump a bunch of slides here. All right, so we created a cookbook. Now we're about to create a cookbook. So when I do chef generate cookbook, it tells me that I can specify things like the copyright, the email, and the license for this cookbook, the name of the cookbook. And then I can also, this is odd or awesome, have my own custom generators for what does a base cookbook look like when I create one. And we're not going to use a custom generator or any of that stuff. We're going to be very simple and about it. We're just going to be in the cookbooks directory, and we're going to chef generate cookbook Apache. So I'm going to do the same over here. Chef generate cookbook Apache. And that's going to create an Apache cookbook for me. It does it best when you type the commands properly. And so now in my cookbooks directory, if I do an ls, you'll see that there's an Apache directory, and I can cd into Apache and do an ls there, and I see a couple of files and a folder called recipes. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create this as a new Git repository. So I now have an Apache repository, and I'm going to git add, or I can do a git status, and see that, oh, there's a bunch of files that need to be added here. I'm going to git add everything, and then git commit. And then let's look at the recipes directory, and you'll see that there's a default recipe within there. So what I actually want to do for my default recipe, I want to take the Apache recipe that I wrote already and just copy that over into this cookbook. So the fastest way for me to do this, without having to retype everything, is just to copy your Learn Chef Lab 2, or was it Lab 3? I don't know. Where did we do that Apache thing? So if you copy Learn Chef Lab 2 apache.rb into your Apache cookbook into recipes as default.rb, and then vim your default.rb. You should have something that looks like this. I'm going to get rid of that backtick stuff because we aren't actually using that. And then I have my package, my service, and my file. But we said that the purpose of this lab is to not use a file. We want to use a template. So I'm going to get rid of that file resource. I'm actually not going to get rid of it. I'm just going to change it. So how do I make this a template resource? So I changed the resource type from file to template. Templates don't really have content, but what they have instead is a source. And the source for this is going to be index.html.erb. What does ERB stand for? Embedded Ruby. And our templating language that we use with Chef is ERB. So I make a small change to my recipe. I set it from a file, I change that to a template. And then I say, go to this other file, index.html.erb, to grab the source. What did I do wrong there? You should spell template correctly. Thank you, Ramez. All right. Everybody have that? Looking good? Now, what do we need to do next, do you think? We should create the template. Guess what we're going to use to create the template? Chef, right? We could just write the file ourselves, but instead, let's look at what we can do with Chef and the Chef generators to generate a template. So we did the Chef Generate Cookbook Apache. Did that, yeah. All right, so we want to create a new template file. The chef command includes a generator for that. So let's see how we can use that generator. So I'm going to do chef generate template space dash dash help. And this will tell me some things that look very similar to when we generated a cookbook. I have a copyright, an email, and a license. But I have this other cool thing when I generate a template called the source file, the -s flag. Now let's just stop and not think about this Apache exercise that we're doing now, but let's think about something maybe a little bit more complex that you might do with Chef. Maybe one of the things that you want to do with Chef is install Postgres, because that's, you know, a pretty good database, right? Well, Postgres, when you install it, the package itself is going to lay down a bunch of configuration files, right? But you don't want to just take the defaults from that package necessarily. You want to manage those configuration files using Chef. So the thing that you might do to create a template from that is you might want to copy an existing configuration file and turn that into a template. Well, the cool thing with this Chef Generate, we can pass a source. So go to this other file on disk and use that as the baseline for my template. So I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to be in my Chef repo. So I'm going to come back up 2 directories, actually. So my PWD is the Chef repo. And I'm going to do a Chef Generate template. I want the template to be called index.html. And I want the source, so -s, I want to point to my existing index.html file, which is at /var www html index.html. Oh, that's totally not the only thing that I need to type. Whew, it failed on me. That's a good thing. So what did I miss? Who knows what I missed? No, not some double quotes. I missed something. Yeah, I missed the path to the cookbook. So I'm in my chef repo. I want this template to go into cookbooks Apache. Like that. This will work. But there's some interesting things that just happened here. If you look at this output, you can see that it generated a file in cookbooks Apache templates default, and it called it index.html.erb. So even though I said what I want is a template called index.html, Chef was smart enough to say, oh, it's a template. You really want an ERB file, and it added that ERB extension for me. If I had typed in index.html.erb, it would not have added another ERB extension for me, which is nice. But then also, if I look at that file, so let's go ahead and vim books. Index.html.erb. Sure enough, it already has the content that was on the file when I ran that. So I now, in my repository, let me quit out of this, cd to cookbooks Apache, and do a git status. And git add. So git status shows that there's now a template directory and that my recipe has been modified. I can git add the templates. And so now I see that I have a new file under templates default index.html.erb. It has that content within it, and I'm ready to check that in. So I essentially met the criteria of my lab. I went to manage the contents of the file separately from the recipe itself. So I've moved it over into a template. Now, let me talk for just a minute about the chef and the generators that we've used. Do you think you have to use the chef generate command? It doesn't do anything special for you. If you know where that template belongs, you can just write out that file. It doesn't matter. Yes?
Why are you driving the template generation from the chef repo instead of from the cookbook?
It doesn't really matter. The thing is, I need to point the path to where I want that to go. I could do a dot. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. How many of you have managed templates with Chef before? And how many of those of you who said yes have put your templates in the wrong directory the first time you created that template? Yeah, of course. That's why I use the Chef tool, because it knows, oh, template, it should go in templates default, and then that's the name of that file. And the rest of you, like, just use the Chef tool, and you'll never feel that pain that the rest of us have felt for many years. All right, it is 12:23. Before we verify that this new cookbook works, what I want to do is take a break for lunch. Does that work for everybody? All right, so that said, we aren't providing lunch. So my question to the class is, how long do you want for lunch? An hour? 45 minutes? An hour. All right. It's 12:23 right now. Let's say 1:30. I'm going to start again. Does that work for everybody? All right, and let me tell you about what we're going to do this afternoon, because some of you might be like, all right, I got it, I'm done. I just want to go eat lunch and have a beer and get ready for tomorrow. That's cool if that's what you want to do. I won't be offended. Well, I might be, but it's cool. So here's what we're going to do this afternoon. We're going to come back. We're going to learn about run lists and how do we take this new cookbook that we've just created and apply that. And then the next thing that we're going to look at is how do we start building some automated testing around this cookbook so that we can test changes to our cookbook before we put them in production. And that's where the real fun, I mean, this has all been fun, don't get me wrong, but that's where the real fun and magic happens. So with that, go away, come back at 1:30. If you don't want to go away because you have questions, that's totally acceptable. Also, you can come ask me questions, or you can stay there and ask me questions. All right. Also, if you have feedback, like, dude, this is way too basic and slow, come tell me that. Or it's the right pace, or it's too fast. let me know, because I'm here for you. All right, and if you're watching on the YouTubes, I'm going to stop sharing. There are 9 viewers. Hello, 9 viewers out there on the web. You can't see me here. Now you can see me. Hello, out there on the web, my 9 viewers. We're going to break for lunch. Watch my Twitter feed, because I'm going to stop this broadcast. I'm going to start another one for after lunch. So you'll have to look out in an hour for the new URL to go to. See you in an hour.